Welcome back to Justice. I am one part of the dynamic duo, Tashira Halyard. Welcome, friend.
And I'm Margo Lindauer, the other part. This is going to be a really good episode.
And I see you pulled your glasses out for it. Those are very nice.
Do you like them?
I love the color, the shape, all of it.
Thanks.
It's giving like professor.
I mean, guilty. Once a professor, always a professor, I guess.
I'm giving showgirl today. So once a showgirl.
You're giving...
You're trying to be nice. Just say it,
no,
friend.
I'm just it's like...
Say it.
It's Lux Showgirl.
Thank you. It's the title of my memoir.
Lux Showgirl.
Yeah. Coming soon.
With the boots. The boots really tap it all together.
They'll be linked, guys.
Okay. Let's get into this episode about real life reparations. What are they? How can they be implemented? How can we live a life with those reparations incorporated? And if it's something we want to aspire to. But before that, what is a weakness of yours that maybe some people listening might not know?
Saying no. Saying no.
Wait, you do say no or you don't say no?
That I don't say no. And I struggle a lot with feeling guilty about not having time, having a very limited schedule, not being able to make kind of equal space for the people who I love in my life. And I will take myself through it as far as the guilt tripping is concerned on my own. And I think I probably come across as very confident, very self-assured. But the second I get criticized in that area, I completely fall apart. It's very difficult for me to navigate other people's expectations of me when I care about them.
And you feel like your response is your weakness?
My response is my weakness because I wish that I could just be like, it is what it is. I don't have time. I'm busy. These are the ways that I prioritize work and pleasure and rest in my life. You're going to have to get in where you fit in, right? I will make time for you, and I'm not doing it intentionally, but I will make time for the thing, for the person as I need to and as I can. I hold on to it because for me, community and family is such a strong value. I'm happy we're talking about this because that just came to me. Community and family is such a strong value that anything that gets in the way of that, I take very personally and I just can't shake off. So I think that is a weakness that at a big age I would like to work on. Protect myself more, I think.
Yeah. I think it's not worth feeling bad about it.
I know. What about you?
I think one of my weaknesses is that I'm really naive about some relationships. And I think that not in any like sexual way, but I fall in love with people really quickly. Like I can come to a judgment about someone's character or how much I want to be friends with them really quickly. And I often think that maybe people are friends when we're not friends.
We talked about this before, for sure, where I'm like, in the same way, which I say to myself, you got to protect yourself.
Right. And so I often find myself in situations where I've grown close to someone or I think we're close and then something happens where it's very clear that we're not close. And I just am confused.
And I also think that the benefit of this is that you prioritize friendships and you're a great friend. You are a great person to be around. You're such a good caretaker. And then the detriment or the other side, the challenge is that sometimes people are receiving that part of you that just don't fucking deserve it.
Well, it's just very confusing to me because I think there's a lot of socialization that feels very intimate that I wouldn't do with people if I wasn't their friend.
Yeah.
But then I guess people just don't have friends.
Well, out of my 3 like very best friends, 2 of them are that. They just do not open themselves up to personal
anyone.
Relationships outside of their family. Period. They have no need for it. They're not interested in it. I think you and I are much more socially aligned in that way. But having them in my life is a constant reminder of, I can create boundaries. You know what I mean? I don't need to be present for everyone all the time. I don't need a lot of friends. No new friends. Drake said it best. I don't need no new friends, right? I can be content with things the way they are.
And I imagine that for some people listening or some of your followers, that might be new news for them because it seems like you have a gazillion friends.
Right, because like 3/4 of them are my family, and I grew up like that. My best friends were my cousins. There was no distinction. Everybody was my cousin. I just thought your cousins were your friends, you know. And so when people see me online, usually it is with close family members, and that obviously those are relationships.
And you
that will
have
never
a lot of
change.
siblings too.
And I have a whole rack of. I am one. If I include my bonus siblings on my mom's side, I'm one of like 7. So yes, I have a very large family, but like chosen family and people that I have that I hold very close to me in my life, that's not a big number at all.
Really interesting. It's something I'm working on because I have a lot of wonderful friends, and then I get in situations where I'm hurt by people who are not friends, and I kick myself.
And you're like, wait, I should have seen that coming. Yeah. Well, the good part about it is that we recognize it and we're working on it. Mm-hmm. All right, so as we get deeper into today's episode, let's jump into dumb shit men say. I feel like this is my second time giving a DeSantis of Ron quote. Ron DeSantis, who is the current governor of Florida, you reminded us on the previous episode that he is soon to likely be a presidential candidate.
Oh, for sure.
And girl, I said America is ghetto. The earth is ghetto. I need to get on a rocket ship out this bitch. Because if that comes to pass, friend, but let's stay focused here. So here's what he said, or this is actually a news article about a piece of legislation that was introduced in the state of Florida. Today, Governor Ron DeSantis announced the Stop the Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees, the Woke Act.
That will give businesses, employees, children, and families tools to fight back against woke indoctrination. We won't allow Florida tax dollars to be spent teaching kids to hate our country or hate each other.
Stop woke, Margo.
What the hell? Included in the proposal builds on actions already taken by Governor Ron DeSantis to ban critical race theory and the New York Times 1619 Project.
In Florida, we are taking a stand against the state-sanctioned racism. That would have been nice if that actually happened. That is critical race theory, said Governor Ron DeSantis. We won't allow Florida tax dollars to be spent teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other. As the parent of school-age children, what is your immediate reaction?
Critical race theory is history. So I am constantly confused about how we can continue to debate history, facts, what happened in this country and around the world. We enslaved Black Africans. Black Africans built our country. That is history. I am making my children listen and watch the 1619 Project on Hulu. Critical race theory is a fundamental component of the curriculum that at my kids' school. Again, privileged, progressive, Quaker school that they go to, but it's the fundamentals upon which they're learning about our country's origin. So I am confused, especially in the South.
Especially in the South. I once had someone say, and this was a white man, and I thought it was so prescient. He said, the South they are the proudest bunch of losers I've ever seen, right? This like fascination with the Confederacy. Y'all lost. And that's just what it is, right? Industrialization won. I don't mean to romanticize it because it wasn't about freeing enslaved people, right? Industrialization won. There was a whole civil war in these here United States. That shit happened. We are now posted. So hearkening back to the good old days, like this kind of fascination with the Dixie South and Gone with the Wind, what are you talking about? And then what also is confusing to me is that some of the people who were supporting this, who were quoted in this article, their roots are with people of color, their roots are immigrant populations. So it is a reminder that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Some people have totally been indoctrinated and they will uphold white supremacy despite where their community's interests lie.
And the confusion among critical race theory and American ideals. Right. So there's this idea that teaching critical race theory is in opposition to working your way and pulling yourself up.
Yeah.
And we can dissect that, like whether that's really a thing. Is it a thing for everyone? It isn't. But sure, there are some people who've been able to do that in this country. But not acknowledging that our country was built on white supremacist ideals.
For sure. That's just a non-negotiable.
But it's just a fact.
Well, so here's the thing too, that I this whole thing with wokeness, it grinds my gears, and so does critical race theory, because you as an academic, me who has been research assistants for an academic in particular, someone who has presented at conferences, who's been published in a scholarly journal before, we know that critical race theory is just that it is a theory. It is a term of art. They are conflating this academic idea and theoretical lens with American history.
And not teaching about slavery in the United States is akin to not teaching about the Holocaust.
And people have...
and other human atrocities.
for sure.
But it's this idea that you can pick and choose which parts of history you want our children to learn about, so other parts disappear. Disappear to where?
It's fascism.
Right. It's a whitewashing and a distilling of a narrative that doesn't exist so that people forget.
It's also very Orwellian, right? It's very like 1984. We're going to tell you that the sky is up and we're going to tell you these things that are just simply not true.
And we're going to push forward this image of what it means to be an American that actually doesn't exist so that people feel like they don't belong.
Because I think the biggest investment of people who are pushing this line of thinking, by the way, I read earlier that there are over 30 states who have introduced some sort of anti-critical race theory legislation. That's over half of the states in the United States of America. But it is this idea, I believe, that anytime that those who are at the margins begin to make gains to come to the center, it's like, nope, y'all getting too woke. Nope, this is about critical race theory. Nope, they're gonna take over. So it's all of these laws and practices and statutes that are gonna be put in place to keep the status quo in power, to keep whiteness supreme. So what they do then is, because they can't say that, is just find a way to code white supremacy differently. But it is all the same narratives that we have been up against since people were first of all, decimated, the genocide of indigenous populations, and then enslavement incurred of Africans subsequently. And so nothing has changed. We're just looking at these things from a brand new lens. And I think Ron DeSantis is at the forefront of these things. And that shit is fucking scary, because he is willing for political gain to completely polarize and divide this country even more so than it already has been. And by not teaching our young people true history, they won't even know where it comes from.
Exactly. And so they'll be learning our history that's not our history.
It's funny because I shared earlier in the previous episode that I used to be a teacher. So here's what scares me. I am 40, be 41 in April. I taught almost immediately after undergrad, after college. So this wasn't that long ago. And do you know how many times my students would tell me that Dr. Martin Luther King freed the slaves? These were Black students. I taught at a predominantly Black Title I school. They would tell me consistently that Dr. King freed enslaved people. So to say that we don't want critical race theory taught, do you know how far back that takes us? We weren't even really talking about critical race theory. We were just talking about including Black people in the curricula, different populations of people in the curricula, the experiences of queer people, right? We were just talking about mentioning those things maybe along with Dr. King. Can we talk about Bayard Rustin as well? Can we talk about Audre Lorde as well? And they said, no. Because there's this quote around this, right? Like, a people who don't know their history, they're lost, or there's something to that effect. And so denying, and I'm speaking specifically about anti-Blackness here, but obviously so many other populations can be included, but denying Black students a knowledge of their history in this country is intentional.
Yep.
Because we will not know the true role that we played in building this country.
Right.
And they want us to be kept in the dark. And that's not fucking conspiracy. That is factual based upon this legislation.
Yep.
So stay tuned. These are the kind of conversations that we were definitely going to be having in the private community.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking about real life implications, right? We have a lot of people who are listening who are living in states where these forms, I mean, Florida, of course, but other states where these types of legislation is getting passed. We want to talk to you. We want to talk about organizing and how kind of allies in other states, allies in this community can work towards spreading kind of true history for our children.
Because I think that that's it. At this point, we have to talk about how we can take hold of educating our children ourselves. And there are so many ways that that can be done.
And we're not talking about homeschooling.
No.
I mean, sure, if that's what you want.
Yeah.
But there are lots of different ways, as we know, to consume content and learn about new things. How can this platform be part of that?
And we're looking forward to having those conversations, so stay tuned. But let's talk about our sponsor for today. It is our kind friends over at Osea. OseaIsTheBomb.com, Margo. I think you and I both agree. They are a vegan and cruelty-free skincare brand, both skincare and body care products. The hero product, however, is the Undaria Algae Body Butter. And you have a great way that you actually use this product, right?
Yeah, so I use this every single day. I use it particularly in the winter with the Undaria Algae Body Oil. So I will get out of the shower and put the oil on my wet body. And then I put the body butter over it. It is just so luxurious. Even when you open it, like, look at this. Oh. It's just a little bit of luxury every day. And I was saying to you that one of the things I really like about it is that it's really, really moisturizing, but it's not sticky or oily or greasy. And our good friends at Osea have given us a special discount code. So with your first order over $60, please type in JustUs10 as you check out, and you'll get 10% off. You'll also get free shipping and samples. They have a lot of combos that we really like too. And this bestseller mini collection is great if you're new to the products because it gives you a little sample of all of the products, but it includes my two favorites, which are the oil and the body butter. And we're really excited to partner. It's a partner with this wonderful company. It's family owned, it's cruelty free, it's vegan, it's climate neutral. It's a great, great supporter of our podcast, and we're thrilled about this collab.
And let me just put a little bit on the knees, girl, because listen, it helps to protect with winter dryness, and that's my thing. Because somebody told me on YouTube, your hands are always ashy.
Why do
people? And I said, tell your mama she ashy. Why is that something that you feel the need to say to me? I don't know, but the Osea product is going to help because my ashiness has been sending people lately.
It's really upsetting, but this will help. Okay, we should jump in because this is a conversation that I imagine we're not going to finish in one episode.
Yeah, for sure.
This is about real life 2023 reparations. What are they? How do we talk about them? How can white folks or non-Black individuals be part of a reparations movement if they so choose? And in what ways have we, and I'm only speaking for myself here probably, benefited from white supremacy? Because if we don't have those conversations in a transparent way, we're not really going to move forward in a conversation that's aiming towards some level of shared resources.
Talk about it. So the conversation is about reparations, but I think, you can't have it without speaking about the need for it from this privilege and supremacy lens, which I think is really important. Something that I read today, that I thought really situated the topic was calling it reparative justice.
I love that.
Right? Because the root of it is really repairing. It is repairing past harms. And for us as attorneys, we get this idea of mitigating harm, of making
Mitigation is a really good term, I think. and repair, right? Because it's not going to right a wrong or erase something that happened. But enslaved Africans, African Americans, Black people are here in this country. They're not going back to Africa because this is their country. So being in this country without equal access to foundational wealth is really the crux of the conversation, right?
So the goal is compensation for past harms and damages that have been done. And I mean, just so we can situate the conversation, I think within a historical context, I just brainstormed just a few things that we know about anti-Blackness in this society that may make the Black community ripe for reparations. So obviously, enslavement, right? Post-slavery, we have this period of Reconstruction, and we have our first Black elected officials. Things were seemingly kind of going to get to a more equitable playing field. White folks said, "Nah, y'all had the game fucked up. We ain't gonna be able to do that. Let's go ahead and implement these here Black codes and put you back in your place." And so it was a myriad of anti-loitering laws and that criminalized Black people for just essentially existing, right, known as the Black codes. And then we go from there, and that then gets cemented into segregation, Jim Crow laws, also known as racial apartheid in this country. And I think we think of apartheid from a South African lens.
Yes, we do.
But that shit happened right here in America. And if that wasn't enough, then we start to talk about redlining and how wealth was accumulated or not in the case of Black Americans in this country, because there was action. This was upheld by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, a federal United States agency, right, of keeping Black folks out of certain neighborhoods and not allowing them to get loans for property ownership. The same thing with the VA loans that so many white people were able to get that built the first suburbs in this fucking country. Let's keep going. And then we have...
I'm not laughing.
the 2008 mortgage crisis that was built on the backs of Black people, many of whom were actually eligible for regular loans, not subprime mortgages that they then ended up foreclosing on, but just regular vanilla loans. As a result, the economy crashes, people lose their homes in droves, in this way that we have been taught to have the American dream and to actually have wealth for once in our family's lifetime is completely eviscerated. Keep going, we get to mass incarceration, privatized prisons, and the way that the war on drugs is really a war on Black and brown bodies. We could go on. We don't want to be here all day, but this is just a small crux of the American experience that Black folks have had that arguably, we believe, makes a strong case for reparations.
And so when you say reparations, or the case being made for reparations based on all of these societal harms, which are undisputed, by the way, the societal harms are undisputed, right? Sure. The vast majority of people impacted by the subprime mortgage crisis were Black and marginalized communities, first-time home buyers, right? People, as you rightly said, that might have been eligible for a 30-year fixed, but were marketed very specifically the subprime products that they were vulnerable to. Mass incarceration, just look at the data, right? Who's incarcerated for what? Where were they from? What communities were they from? Who's arrested for loitering, right? Those sort of things. The data's there, all of that. So we don't need to rehash. These are parts of history that have disproportionately harmed Black Americans.
And we will link resources that have researched and written about these topics for many years.
Okay, so let's assume, even though there are going to be people who disagree with us, that all of those historical things that you talked about to this current day happened and had a negative, profound impact on the economic vitality and well-being of Black individuals. What does reparations or reparative justice look like to you?
I think you can ask 10 people this question and get 10 different answers. But for me, this is what it would have looked like. I say to you often, Margo, that this idea, these stereotypes around like a laziness and shiftlessness are just being used by white hegemony to create division, because I don't know lazy black people, right? I know lazy people who are all different races, all different genders, etc. But as a category of people, how can you have built a country through enslavement and actually be lazy, right? Like as a value system, and actually is not true. And so I think about my grandfather who spent 40 years in a phosphate mine to support his entire family. My grandmother, who was a domestic worker, that kind of grind and daily literal back-breaking labor, if it had been any other field, if it had been corporate America and you had that level of like work and investment and that work ethic, my family would be fucking wealthy. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Because that's the grind and the discipline that it takes to be poor in this country. So for me, what I would have liked to have seen is for us not to have to worry about going to college. I think as we talk about the student loan crisis, we talk about how many black people are in debt, sometimes for degrees that are not at all worth the investment.
Well, that's a whole other conversation. From schools that are not even accredited. Also predatory institutions, right? What would it have meant for the government to have said every black person at the age of 18 has this amount of dollars to get a post-secondary education? In whatever type of institution they want, whether it be a training, a trade school, skill building, private, public. You know, everyone has $100,000. Do with it what you.
And let me just say, somebody's going to listen to this and say, well, the government can't do that. Yes, the government fucking
Did
can.
anyone live through COVID?
Did you not get that cash stipend?
The government just sent people checks. They actually sent some of my wealthiest friends checks, which is really confusing to me.
Did you not just play pickleball down at the pickleball court? Did you not stop at a stoplight? Did you not send your child to a public school? Did you not walk on the sidewalk? We're totally comfortable with the government playing a role in those ways. But when it comes down to money, no, girl, we ain't going to be able to do it. And it's fucking racist.
Well, and it's also not true. We have government benefits. I mean, they're all screwed up, but we have TANF, we have Social Security, right? We have Medicaid and Medicare. Again, these are programs that are
WIC.
not, right, these are, right, WIC, food stamps, right? They are not perfect. There are a lot of people who are left out who should be included. But yes, the government can spend their money however the government wants to spend their money.
That's it.
And it's all of our money. We all pay taxes.
And so it goes back to this idea of like this puritanical, like Calvinistic American value of rugged individualism, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And nobody actually did that shit. Like Donald Trump is still living off of a trust, but yet he's this profound and prolific business person. No, he's not. He's actually quite stupid, right? But we're taught these narratives because we want to so sincerely believe in a system that is not working and only benefiting a certain number of people. So one would have been college assistance for sure. The next thing is, as long as we live in a society where wealth is accumulated around home ownership and property ownership, reparations has to look like support in being able to own a piece of property. I, as an attorney, post-law school, just bought my first home not too long ago, worked 7 days a week for a year and a half to make that happen. And it's because I had no trust to draw from. Nobody in my family passed away, so therefore I was able to get an inheritance. I got no lump sum. You know, nobody was able to put money to the side for me. And it doesn't mean that I didn't have a great life, and every single one of my material needs and most of my wants were met day to day. But we are talking about the dichotomy of wealth accumulation, which looks very, very different in this country.
So I just want to kind of bring this to the personal because, you know, one of the things that Tashira and I do on this podcast is be honest about our real life. And this is clearly one of the ways that I have deeply benefited from white supremacy. I can speak of my own experiences with our first home. So I hustled after law school too. I had 3 jobs. I was in legal services. I did court-appointed work and I tutored. so that Josh and I could buy our first home, and I started paying my loans, which I did accumulate a lump sum. But our other lump sum that went into our first down payment for our first home that we bought after we got married was from his bar mitzvah.
But he was an adult. So how did he still have that?
Because one thing that happens at bar mitzvahs is a lot of people give cash gifts. Wow. So Josh's parents invested the money that he had gotten at his bar mitzvah, and that was half of our down payment for our first home.
Whoa.
So again, levels of privilege, right? But that's how we bought our first home, which we have leveraged into now multiple homes, and other forms of privilege. But that is a benefit of white supremacy
in every way,
right? And so that we have to acknowledge that anyone who receives help on a down payment, there are 10 million more people who don't have any help
at all. And I think...
And there are, of course, white people who also don't have help, right? So no one's saying that. But I think when we talk about our own experiences in these very certain ways of wealth accumulation, we have to acknowledge that despite maybe working at the same level, in the same ways, that I was able to benefit from this privilege before you.
Right, and even earning the same salary sometimes,
right, that's what I mean.
And so I say this often to people that Black folks can be, and this goes back to a case for reparations, we can be incredibly high income earners and have zero wealth or negative wealth because of student loans and other things. And debt. And
other financial obligations, because a lot of Black people are taking care of multiple people.
You get a little bit of money and all of a sudden you're the rich auntie.
This conversation leads me to something that I've been wanting to talk to you about for a long time, which is this idea of mutual aid that has existed forever. I do not know who coined it. I don't want to say anything kind of negative about it, but it's definitely something that became much more widely understood at a visceral level during the deep pandemic, when lots of organizations were closed, people didn't have access to food, shelter, housing, etc. And many, if not most, communities in the United States had mutual aid boards where people were donating either cash assistance or buying groceries or whatever. And you and I had a conversation at that time because there was something that felt off to me about it. And you were like, this is something that Black people have been doing forever. Why are we acting like this is a new thing that we take care of each other during times of crisis, right? And I think, again, the whitewashing of some of community building, I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, well, because I think that, and this is very, I think, American, because there are plenty of European countries, obviously countries all over the world, where this is not true. But it is a nuclear focus. It is myself, my spouse, our 2.5 kids, our dog, our white picket fence, and our Subaru. And we don't care about nothing else. And if you're struggling, that's your problem.
And something you did.
You made a wrong decision for that to be your problem. And what we have always understood inherently is that the problem is structural, even if we didn't have the language to describe it, right? And so this idea of communal caretaking of either your church or your religious institution, of your Black fraternal order, like Order of the Eastern Star, or the Masons, right? Your neighbors. I grew up in a neighborhood, Margo, where I remember this like it was yesterday. I was outside riding my bike in the rain, and my neighbor was like, "Get your ass in the house, it's raining outside." And I took my ass in the house because it was raining outside, right? So it is this idea that we all have the responsibility for each other. I need a cup of sugar. I need some toilet paper. I got to leave the house real quick. I don't have my key. Watch my house for me. And I think COVID made something that communities of color have known inherently for many, many years. It brought it to the mainstream.
That the government's not going to fix it.
That the government ain't going to fix it. They can.
But they're not. Right. Can I also offer another kind of tidbit into this conversation that really, really burns me?
What is it?
How can we have a conversation around reparations when we have an education system in this country that's based on property taxes? Like, isn't that the most inherently unjust thing? If we're thinking structural, right? Structural injustice. And we know that there's been redlining and whitewashing and unequal access to property. And we know that suburban white communities of wealth have, one, much higher property values, but two, those property values, the money associated with those property values are invested in schools in a different way than communities that are struggling or not as financially well off get to fund their schools.
See, this is why DeSantis is telling you you gotta stop that wokeness, Margo, because you're tying things together that are historically accurate, and it's scary because you're making a very valid and obvious argument.
Every elementary school in the state of, let's say, Massachusetts, where we are right now, should invest the same amount per child in every community.
These are children, and I think that is one of the most heinous things about white supremacy to me, and the evilness that is within it, that in order to uphold a particular institution, you are willing to have a child suffer. A fucking child who hasn't even had the opportunity to make a mistake in life or to make a bad decision, which we're so often told. So then it becomes, well, your mama made a bad decision. She's just a welfare queen. Your daddy's locked up. No one cares about you. It's the way these kids are being raised. That's what the problem is. It's always back to the individual behavior. It is never any acknowledgement of the structural issues at play. Because if we acknowledge that, as you just did with this disparity in investments in public education, then we have to fix it. And people don't want to fix it. They're very comfortable with their kids going to the best schools, NIMBYism, and other kids not. Because they've earned the right to go to their good school.
Yeah.
But let me just say that I am actually really, I feel encouraged because I have a client, I think that you know, in Pittsburgh, who I work very closely with. Shout out to Gwen's Girls. We've been doing this thing for the past few years now. I do all of their public policy work, and I help to shepherd and facilitate their coalition. And one of our partners, the Education Law Center there, was just successful in a lawsuit that they filed many years ago, claiming constitutional violations in the ways in which public education funds are being levied in the state.
Okay,
and I
so maybe
think,
that can...
that and we know as lawyers, obviously, that what happens in Pennsylvania can only maybe be persuasive in what happens in other states. It is not going to hold precedent because this did come through the state court. However, it is a good sign because the argument that they successfully made was that it was in violation of the state constitution. And the judge agreed. And so now here's what the judge did say, however, that it has to go back to the legislature to determine the remedy, but that the violation was undeniable.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. TBD on that. But
TBD.
I think that's a conversation that we should all be having more, right? How are some of these public institutions and public benefits? Public education in this country is a right. Why is one child's right different than another child's right just based on the property value where they live?
And it has ricocheting effects for the rest of your life, the way you were educated as a young person. And that cannot be denied. Your access to a quality education affects you forever.
And it's not just a quality education, it's a supportive environment, it's access to arts and
it's social emotional support,
right, and arts, sports, music, social activism, like all of those things start in school. And I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a woman who lives in Boston, and there's busing in Boston, or there's a history of busing in Boston. And one of the programs that emanated from busing is this program called Medco, where kids are, you have to apply. I don't understand the application process. It's competitive. And basically, Black children from Boston are bused to suburban white high schools.
Yep. Like
that's some sort of solution. And she was saying that her son got into Medco and got in, I'm not going to say the town, but it is a town about 50 minutes outside of Boston. But from where she lives on that side of the city, it would be easily an hour and a half commute each way. It is a town on the ocean in Massachusetts that is predominantly white, doesn't even begin to describe it, but there are very few children of color. It's very gender normative. It is a town that really upholds sports. Her child is very artistic. Anyway, I kind of held my mouth because I didn't know her well, and I said, what are you thinking? And she goes, well, I'm not sending him there. And I go, good, because he wouldn't be safe. And she said that was what I thought as well.
That just put chills in my body. So even when we are
but that's
given the opportunity.
But again, what? That's the solution? That there's a program where certain kids can go to other communities? Why aren't we making our high schools in our communities?
In the communities better.
Okay. So that busing is a whole other thing. But I think, again, around the structure, like we wouldn't have busing if there wasn't structural problems with how our education system is working. Because there would be no need that each community would have different educational opportunities for our kids. Some trades, some STEM, some arts, some, right? All of that can happen within one community. It's choice. Exactly.
And let me just say, too, that like this being the solution is what breeds the Michael Jordan and the Oprah complex. Because then it becomes, well, look at this person. They're doing great with their lives. Look at Dr. Ben Carson. Why can't you get it together? Why are you smoking dope on the corner? You know? So it starts to become this very back to an individual focus about individual choices and bad behavior, as if a meritocracy truly exists in this country, and it does not. And also there are harms that you've just mentioned of going into those environments. Like when I tell you I was a ghetto black girl in my international baccalaureate program, and it was so difficult for me to make adjustments and to hold on to my identity and to feel it like it was okay to have my friends that weren't in this program with me, and to be able to manage those relationships just the same, and to not feel ashamed about not what I didn't have when I walked into my classroom with my peers. The mind fuck that children have to go through that they should not is almost like a type of psychological warfare,
right,
just to get an education.
And the constant and real-time code switching.
Absolutely.
Right? That you had to do through all of your higher education.
It's this mask that Langston Hughes talks about, right? We wear the mask that is beguiled. And it is this, in order to be successful, you have to adopt whiteness.
Right. And I think your point also brings up this idea of the anomaly, right? Or the example, well, he did it or she did it, so you can do it. And I hear this a lot, like, well, that person can do this thing, so why can't you? And I find it so violent, kind of across the spectrum, because that person is not you and that person is not me. And you don't know what that person goes home to at night, or the support that they have, or what they haven't shared. No one knows what people are doing that they're not sharing. And so using examples of anomalies to create a narrative that everyone has equal access to building wealth in this country is erroneous. It's just not true. And even say, if there are individuals, because there are, who have, through their own grit, through their own hard work, through luck, through connections, through access, through political affiliation, through religious affiliation, through whatever, made it, despite all odds. Why is an anomaly used to defend a system that is inherently racist?
Because white people don't have to have anomalies, right? You could, we're gonna tell our age with this example. Open a phone book today and find a myriad of practitioners in your daily life. Who is going to fix your car? Who is going to be your attorney in your custody hearing? Who is going to be your dentist? Who's going to be your optometrist, or your, who is going to be your gynecologist? All of these people, you could assume you were going to find a black person or white person, to service your day-to-day needs. I cannot make that assumption. Even in an area that has a pretty diverse group of people, I could not make that assumption. Do you know that I did not meet my first black attorney until I got to law school? And the examples are not
right. And I remember,
there.
I hope it's okay that I share this. If it's not, we can. I remember that the experience you had when you met a Black oncologist and through your breast cancer journey, and how moving and powerful that was for you to kind of connect with your doctor in that way.
Visibility and representation will always matter. And the fact that it cannot just be understood.
And I think about that all the time, right? Because my reflection, particularly in this phase of my life where I live, in the community that I live, is reflected all the time. Right? All the time. Even through this period of change for me, like I go to different places and I meet women in similar situations, in similar life experience, in similar phases with similar age children who lived in the same similar communities. And maybe we have overlapping people that we know, right? I run into people that know people who know people who know people who knew me, blah, 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 all the time. And that's a level of comfort that I can never take for granted.
It's a privilege.
My breast surgeon went to the same school that my children go to.
Wow.
That was one of the first conversations that we ever had. Right? So again, that's not everyone's experience, but that's my experience. And that is a benefit. I benefit from white supremacy.
So we talked about support with homeownership. We talked about support with higher ed. Are there other ways that you could think reparations could show up in our lifetime?
Yeah, so there are other ways, and I want to talk about two ways that I've seen it show up and some of the pros and cons of both, if that's okay. So one is something that we've talked about on this podcast a lot, is financial investment in organizations and in companies and establishments that are Black owned or immigrant owned or, women owned, right? So money is power. Access to resources is a real thing. Who has access to resources is a real thing. And so investing in communities and in communities of color financially, whether it be through direct investment, frequenting establishments, or investing in campaigns, organizations, I think is one way. Well, I want you to speak to that.
No, I think that is incredibly important because those investments could reverberate in our community for generations, honestly. And it's really, really important. It's kind of like this stereotype of all Jewish people being lawyers or being wealthy. I'm sure it comes from, at some point, the idea that there were these fields that were held in high esteem.
Or that we had access to.
That you had access to. And so that access and those resources, again, can affect positively an entire community. I think my only concern with that is, and this is something that I go back and forth with a lot about, like Black kind of financial investments, is does that reach a structural issue? Because we're still under the same economic system that depends upon white supremacy and division.
So I was hoping you were going to say that, because that's always been my, like, is this actually helpful? Which gets me to my second question. It's one that we've talked about a little bit, but not at length. Is this individual, I don't even know what it would be called, like individual reparations? So people Venmoing each other?
I don't like that. I'll let you finish.
You don't want me to talk about it?
No, I'll let you finish by saying I don't like it as an individual form of reparations. But go, no.
No. Okay, so I also don't like it.
Okay.
But I see it a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it is getting in the way of structural change, because reparations is structural. It's not individual.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
100%.
Okay.
And so for me, what I find that does much more often is it tends to assuage a certain amount of white guilt and fragility.
So exactly. And it makes people feel like they're part of something, which I'm not saying they're not, but they're not part of structural change.
At all. And listen, go off, sis. If you feel like there's a cute little Black kid in your community and you want to, help the parents in a particular way with cash assistance, please do so. I mean, that is this mutual aid concept that we're talking about, but
it's not reparations.
It is not reparations.
Okay.
And it is not going to change the trajectory of the Black community for generations to come because you put a Black child in summer camp one summer. That's one kid that you did something nice for that arguably you probably should anyway, because you are a human in this society that should have empathy for other people. That is not reparations. So, and also I think what happens as well that's dangerous, and I've been the recipient of this before, is that oftentimes white folks with resources, they don't know poor black people.
They just know a black person.
They know a black person. And if I'm the poorest person you got some work to do, bro. And I'm not saying I'm at all wealthy, but I know people who are struggling to put food in their refrigerator.
Not poor. But again, and something we've talked about, it's not like how you spend your money or how I spend my money is not. I think it's a distraction. I think it's a distraction that is getting in the way of us having real conversations around structural change. So yes, send Venmos to whoever you want. Help people pay for things when they're in need. That probably should be regardless of skin color or whoever, right, whatever experiences have brought them to this country, right? There are going to be families in need in your community. I would argue that we all have a responsibility to help. But reparations is different. Reparations is creating, at least in my mind, a basis of equality or equal standing in how we access and grow our familial wealth.
And because we have not had a truth and reconciliation moment in this country around the harms of indigenous genocide and enslavement of African bodies, and also the continued state-sanctioned violence that we experience, what that means is that this conversation around reparations, it sounds so radical.
But it's not.
But it is not. And we also don't even know if the things that we're talking about are truly going to level the playing field. But we have to start somewhere.
It won't level the playing field because like wealth has been accumulated.
We're behind the eight ball already.
So one of the things that has been happening at smaller levels in different communities is this concept of universal basic income, which again isn't equalizing the playing field in any way, but creating a basis for sustenance. I know I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have a universal basic income program here, which I am so happy to be part of as a community. I'm so happy to support our Mayor Siddiqui, go Mayor Siddiqui, on kind of this program, which is a pilot of a certain group of mothers and giving them my understanding is just cash assistance every month at a certain level to support them, to not support them. It's not, but to help support their and their families' lives, to see if it has, which it will, an impact on their well-being.
100%.
And so that's another part, I think, of a systemic conversation that we can have, right? Governments can do this. We can give people $1,500 a month. We can make more affordable housing. We can help people buy homes.
And I think if race wasn't part of the conversation here as a social construct, it wouldn't be that difficult to digest because we see this in Nordic countries all the time. Assistance around healthcare, assistance around child care and child rearing, what people need as they age. There is
aging in place.
Much stronger understanding of the resources that are necessary for that to happen, and those resources are in place in a way that they are not here. And so the criticism that I often get when I bring up those examples is, yeah, but those populations are much more monolithic, and I get that, but I think that when we talk
monolithic in terms of race, but again, what someone needs to age in place is not specific to race.
But I think their point is, yeah, that can happen there because racism is not the undercurrent in the society. So there's not this like built-in type of implicit bias around someone not deserving something just because of how they look, just because of their ancestry. So in order for us to implement some of those same things here, we would have to first figure out what the fuck we're going to do about racism. And I think that would require us to do something about the fucking economic system, because all of this today that we've spoken about is also being supported, perpetuated by the form of capitalism that we have in the United States of America, which is another conversation for another day, hopefully.
So if you're interested in this or other conversations around systemic change, I would really encourage you to join our paid community because while, I would really encourage you to join our paid community. We're going to be continuing to talk about this and what it means for you. We assume and hope that people don't necessarily agree with us, and we can have a thoughtful conversation around reparations in a way that that can be fruitful.
Before we head out of here, I also wanted to bring up California's Reparations Task Force because there may be a model there for us to look into. It's all still developing in real time as we record this episode, but stay tuned. Let's see what happens there.
Yeah, we'll link a bunch of stuff in the show notes around reparations and try to keep it as current as possible. I mean, like Tashira said, these are real-time conversations happening. History is changing, and we can be part of that. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see you soon.